Thanks for staying with us. Well, that report tells you how the whole thing is being reflected in Lagos and perhaps other parts of Nigeria. One of them is Kano. Let's go there now and speak with Professor Shehu Musa, who is an agroeconomist and Vice Chancellor of the Kano State University of Science and Technology. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Prof. First of all, a quick take of yours on how people are taking in the lockdown in Kano.
Good morning, Mr. Chris. Let me start by greeting all of us. The lockdown issues in Kano has been going on. To a large extent, people, there are some good level of compliance, and there are, some level of non-compliance. These are issues dealing with, social issues, dealing with, perspective by, different people, and, some have a mixed understanding as to really whether this exists or do not exist. And I think that's an, part of the issues that may affect somehow the, full or 100% compliance with lockdown directives. But I think by and large, overall, I think people have substantially played their own part. It's not yet as excellent as we would expect it, but I believe the team on ground are doing the necessary adjustment and the necessary strategies that will address, local concerns, and that will address, specific issues. So really, I think while we need to do more, but we also need to appreciate the fact that the whole COVID-19 issue is new to the world, and people are not familiar with it. And Kano is also, like Lagos, is a large, population state, and dealing with huge population will means that the challenges are more than dealing with a population that is relatively less. But I think with the strategies put in place by both the state COVID team and then the national team that is working in harmony with the state team, still putting in major imperatives that will be able to enable better implementation of the lockdown policy directives.
Just something you said right now that I thought to quickly piggyback on. You said that the people are perhaps having a hard time complying with these directives. In your opinion, what do you think is responsible for that? Is it the communication of it? Is it the whether or not it is true? Is it whether or not the people believe in the communication that they are getting? What exactly do you think is the reason why people are having doubts about COVID-19?
I think it's not only in Kano. The doubt exists virtually everywhere. There are so many permutations, and understanding of different segment of people. But you must also remember that this lockdown is coming at a critical period of the fasting period, which is where it has its own challenges as well. This is a period where everybody is trying to eke out a living, to comport his family during the breaking of the fasting and what have you. So by and large, there are still people a pocket of people that do not believe that even the COVID issue exists. And I think this corroborates with the last guest. He has reported something of this nature, and I believe substantially, what we need to do is to continue to educate more on people to continue to understand that this is the COVID-19 is a real issue. It exists, and we all have to come together to play our own part to see how we can make this system better, to see how we can overcome this challenge together. It's not a one-man issue, or it's not a one, directional issue. The federal government is doing its own best. The state government is doing its own best. The community are doing their own best. Institutions are doing their own best. Individuals are doing their own best. The well-to-do are doing their own best. In Kano, if you look at what Dangote is doing, what the Samad Isaac Rabi is doing, and quite a number of philanthropists, the state government is up and doing in terms of addressing these challenges. So really, this is a new phenomena altogether, and therefore it must come with certain reservations. Naturally, we may not have 100% to be on board to say that, look, this is a reality and everybody has accepted. But I'm happy to say that at least if you look at the statistics being chunked out these days, the number of COVID positive cases becoming reduced, the level of the mysterious deaths that has been recorded over the first few weeks has drastically reduced. So all these put together, the message is we must all put our heads together. We must collaborate. We must have synergy of action. We must ensure that there is massive enlightenment of people. We must continue to engage in dialogue with people in understanding the peculiarities of a specific group and specific states. Like I said, if we take the strategies that may work in Kano, may not necessarily be the same strategy you adopt in Jigawa or probably in Bauchi or Katsina or Sokoto or any other place.
Let's
Remember,
talk about
Kano
those
is
strategies.
cosmopolitan areas. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about those strategies. And the irony of this is, whether people believe it or not, there's an obvious impact on the economy. I understand that's your area of strength. And, there's been this conversation about whether to have a lockdown, the pros and cons of a lockdown as against allowing life go back to normal. And they also tell you there are pros and cons of that. And the usual challenge, not just for the PTF or those in charge in Nigeria, but around the world, is how to balance this. Looking at the approach we're taking, where we extended this gradual easing of the lockdown by another 2 weeks, looking at all this, there's the framework we have aligned with, would you say that we're going about it the best way?
We have to understand the magnitude of the socio-economic impact on COVID-19 is huge. And I think this is the right point where we now begin to look at the economics of this lockdown, especially when you look at the job lost, the closure of the manufacturing industry, the textile industry, the garment industry, the creativity industry. 90% of our population have to eke out their living on a daily basis. They have to go and do some artisanal work, and all this has been closed down. And remember, Kano has huge market. Kano covers virtually all the West African countries in terms of supply of commodities. And if you look at the volume of the transaction, if you take the Dawano market, for example, this is one of the largest market in Africa that deals with agricultural produce and products. If you take the Kwari market, this is a textile market. If you take a Wambai market, Senga market, these are essential commodities market. Naturally, the impact will be huge. We all need to remember that COVID-19 has even ravaged, the well-developed nations, and they're still fighting with those issues. And naturally, we will not be isolated in Africa, and we cannot be excluded also in Nigeria. And Kano will not be an exception. This is a global issue. This is an issue that affects everybody. And I think what we really need to do, we have to deal with the 3 Ls precisely in an appropriate manner that will give us a better soft landing point for everybody. If you take about the 3 Ls, the life, the livelihood, and liberty, these are 3 issues that are, have synergy and have interrelationship. The disease is existing, and we need to survive. And at the same time, despite the disease, we need to have some aspect of livelihood. And in working out our livelihood, we have certain level of liberty. So we must strike a balance between these three issues: life, livelihood, and liberty. You cannot make it when you are not healthy, when you are not, when your life is affected. Then naturally your livelihood is affected, and your liberty is also affected. And if we allow you your liberty to go and do whatever you want to do, simply because you have a feeling and government will not have a control, then we run into trouble of affecting the life aspect. So I think the effort that has been put by government, particularly both the national and the state government, I think it's a good strategy. Lockdown will continue, but then there is an easing out of 1 or 2 days, after which people can now go and make a living. That will now give those that are, within the low ladder of economic income to have an opportunity for 1 or 2 or 3 days within a week to really work out some few issues, how they can survive and how they can make it. And I'm also believe that a lot of philanthropists have really come in Kano, and they have come aggressively well, and they have tried to balance these three issues. So the strategy that has been implemented by both the national team and then the state team, by my own judgment, I think these are strategies that are really working, and we really need to continue with them to ensure that we achieve a favorable balance between life, livelihood, and liberty. This is the only way we can get out of this. We cannot say because people are suffering, we are going to open up everything, let everything collapse, and let everybody do whatever he wants to do. Government has a responsibility to protect life and properties, and they must live up to that responsibility, and I'm happy that they are living up to that responsibility, both from the state level and from the national level. So what we really need to do is to continue to monitor and see. Now that we started with a complete lockdown, and then now we are easing up with few days up, and now Kano is adopting the 3 days model, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. These are good strategies that will naturally help people to balance the three aspects that I have earlier mentioned in terms of their life, in terms of their livelihood, and in terms of their liberty. Overall, I believe this is quite apt, and government needs to continue on this direction.
So, Prof, staying with the 3 L's, life, livelihood, and liberty.
Yes.
For life, I think we have fairly good picture of the impact on life. The NCDC releases figures from time to time. We see the number of fatalities, the number of cases recorded. But for the aspect of livelihood, which I think is also obviously a major deal, it seems we don't exactly have a clear picture. You talked about the markets, food production, how that is being affected. Talk about job losses. Can you just tell us how that is being affected, especially in your area, in terms of food production, job losses? How much of an impact has this had in that area?
When you look at the production aspect, the agriculture aspect, I think we are lucky. The season is just starting. And my take on this is that government needs to look at, apart from the efforts that has been done to curtail the COVID-19 issues at the moment, now is the right time to begin to think about post-COVID scenarios. And by this I mean both the national government and the state government and the local government must have a synergy of action to ensure that the lockdown do not affect completely the agricultural production aspect. Because if the agricultural production aspect is being affected by the lockdown, then it means there will be a huge crisis in terms of food security for the country, not only in Kano, but all over. So I think this is the right time for government to begin to think about the post-COVID committee. We don't have to wait until everything is over, then we begin to do some cosmetic of what do we do. This is the best time to think about post-COVID committee that will come up with strategies, timeline, deliverables as to how government will ensure that agriculture is not being affected by this.
Very quickly, just one moment, Prof. Just one moment, Prof. Just one moment so that we can take it all in before we let you go in a few minutes. We understand from some experts in your field that the food in the markets now, they came from the last quarter of last year, and that's what we usually enjoy in the first quarter of each year. And the production of food has already slowed down since the month of March. That's about 2 months ago, and that we're already missing out on the production cycle going forward that should take care of us in the second, third, and the fourth quarter and all of that. How badly affected is the agriculture cycle or harvest cycle? And please specifically, not just give us the guesswork, what are the specific steps that need to be taken, whether by government or private sector, so we do not have what you just called a food crisis?
All right. I think, one, we need to understand clearly, and I think this is about the time that those that have some, unclear understanding about the strategies that government has put in place on the ban of importation of rice, this is the best time that people have seen the real impact on the ban. You can imagine if we are completely importing rice at the moment with this crisis, it would have been a double tragedy for us. So I think in terms of steps that needs to be taken, like I said, the rainy season have not gone so deep, and therefore we can do some adjustment that will enable us to work forward and to do a better work. One, we need to have the supply of input side needs to be improved in terms of fertilizer, seed, agrochemicals, and what have you. The second aspect is the mechanization aspect need to also look into, so that we can be able to increase our production probably to more than a double digit, or maybe 100% or 200% increase if mechanization can make this possible. Extension arm of government also needs to be improved, so that farmers will be educated on the best way to handle and to operate within the context of the lockdown issues, and then within the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. We also need to work very assiduously in terms of linking research and farmer group, because there are a lot of researches that has been done, and this can help the country to double its production, or even more than double. And again, we also need to, as a matter of strategy, to work on irrigation agriculture vehemently well. I know there are ongoing efforts, but we need to do more, because with the irrigation agriculture, we can as well double the production level. We can also engage in issues to do with greenhouse agriculture. We can also engage in issues to do with water harvesting technology that will be able to help us to bridge the gap that may ensue as a result of this COVID-19 pandemic. And then perhaps the funding aspect need to be improved. Farmers need to have access to finances, and that would definitely assist. And then we can also work more closely on the issue of group farming or cooperative farming rather than individual, especially at rural level. And I think the incentive for large-scale commercial agriculture to make progress in Nigeria is within side. People can see there are a lot of opportunities and advantages that they can key into agriculture. And I believe once we put all this into consideration, then we can be able to overcome completely the issue of the possible food shortages that may arise. But I think the wake-up call is we must begin to act quickly, and we must begin to act decisively, and we must begin to act in a cooperative and in a collaborative manner that will be able to enable all the actors within the agricultural sector to have synergy of action that would enable the country to produce enough food that will enable it to feed its own population. And when feeding, we begin to see how we can actually even export to other countries and to keep our farmers alive.
Forgive me, Professor.
Yes.
It's good to be philanthropic and to think about other people, but I think I like the first part that you said we should be able to feed ourselves first. Let's start from there. Well, thank you very much.
Yes.
It's been a wonderful having
this
conversation with you this morning. Professor Shehu Musa is an agroeconomist and Vice Chancellor, Kano State University of Science and Technology.